May Padmore. Most people know me as Maisie. I am the eldest of three daughters of George Arthur Padmore Jr. and Pearline Eleanor Thomas Padmore. My paternal grandparents were George Arthur Padmore Sr., George Padmore, and Edith May Wiles Padmore. Start with the kind of, at least my memory of them. I would say, so the kind of people my grandparents, paternal grandparents were. My grandfather was very nice. He was very quiet. We didn't really interact with him that much growing up. I mean, he was, around, but really my grandmother was the one who was, I would say, very present in our lives, very present in our daily lives. A bit of a matriarch really for her children and her stepchildren, her kids and her nieces and nephews and cousins for sure. My grandfather, yeah, he was quiet, but he was very nice. He was very nice to us. We didn't talk that much. I think when we moved to the States, and when were a little bit older, we probably got to talk to him a lot more. He was very knowledgeable about the history of Liberia, extremely knowledgeable about the political history in particular, and his family's history. And he said really funny things when he started to get a little bit older, which were always amusing. My grandmother, who I think I probably knew more intimately from the time we were children, used to call me Maisie Dotes sometimes. She definitely spoiled us. I have strong memories of eating a lot of good things at their house. They had a huge kitchen, a huge pantry that always had treats. There was always cake, which I loved. My grandfather had cake, I think maybe every day. All of the cousins, we would go to the house and spend many, many, many hours there. My grandmother was very sweet. She was very strong as well. And she was nice. She was nice to my mom. She was nice to all her daughters-in-law. She was pretty cool. And she was a career woman. And when I became an adult and started to work and got to know her a little bit more and learn more about her career, it was incredibly impressive. She was, I think, the first woman who served as a cabinet member in the government of Liberia. And she was formidable, I will say that much. She took, when she walked in a room, she lit it up. She was also very elegant and very beautiful. And she could certainly hold her own, and she seemed to be able to balance being a wife of her generation, as well as a professional person and a really great grandmother, without a doubt. My father's best qualities were that he was what I call a girl dad. He was very gentle in his personality. I noticed that all his girl cousins and his sister they really liked him a lot. They loved him a lot. He was very comfortable around us. He was always present, at least in my memory of us growing up. They definitely were cool parents. They were young and they were very glamorous and they had parties in the house. I remember them when I was a kid. But he was a really good dad. Every birthday, he would take me and my sister Shirley. We were only 3 years apart, but our birthdays are in February. And we would go into his study. He had a show called Music for Modern on the radio. And he had the studio in the house where he would record all his shows. And we go in there and giggle and make funny noises. And he said, well, that's my number one daughter, Maisie, or whatever. But for our birthdays, we'd go into his study and we would have a drink with him. And he was the coolest. He had an amazing record collection. He had great musical taste. And I think he instilled in me anyway, the love of music. He was a real family man. He was committed to his children. He never was separated from us for any long period of time, except immediately after we moved to the States during 1980. But that was the longest we were ever apart from him until we left the house to go to college and to, become grown-ups, basically. He always talked about my mom like they just got married, which was a little annoying sometimes, but very cute and very sweet, especially in their older years. Um, and he was just a very, very loving person, very loving and pretty humble considering all that he accomplished. Well, certainly I'm a musician. I'm a professional musician. I love music, so I would say that was the most major uh, that was the most impactful thing I think that I gleaned from him. Um, he was always into family. I think, I'm pretty sure, created our first family tree, all of the branches. Thank you very much. Um, and so that was a big deal to me. And so I think it instills in me and my sisters the need to stay connected to, as much as possible, to members of our family, including what Americans would call extended family. Um, he was always good with us, and he was good with kids. I love kids. I think that that was probably an influence. He was a warm person. I think I have some of that personality. He always told me I reminded him of his mother, which was, I would say, one of the biggest compliments I ever received. And I think all of that had an influence on me because she had a personal life, which I'm working on. And she was a professional woman, which I am, as are my sisters. In addition to creating our family tree, of course, our dad talked to us about our history and connection to Barbados. And a number of Liberian families, including the Barclays, came from there. And we are, of course, have Barclay lineage. He and some of his first cousins took a trip a number of years ago, and they went to Barbados to, discover, visit, and discover more about their Barbadian roots. I believe they met a woman there who was a historian, and she gave them a tour and all of that. And I think all of those things continue to influence him and help to build the tree further. He even connected with folks not just from Barbados, but other islands, who are our relatives, cousin Gloria Griffith and her family. So, and there was another woman, I can't remember right now. I think she worked for the UN at some point. But anyway, he was definitely connected to the diaspora beyond just Liberians. So he really was interested in family, and particularly, I think, just history of families. He had a great sense of humor. I had a lot of very funny jokes, some off color. And I think what I always thought was cool about it, besides the fact that he really was a very cool guy, was that he would, I think after a certain age, he would tell us jokes that, maybe a more uptight parent wouldn't tell his kids. He would tell us. I remember he told a joke that was like, "Is this my dad telling me this joke?" It was hilarious. And so I think it made us comfortable around him, and we were comfortable just being ourselves. That was really great. When he started to get sick and toward the end of his life, he was still hilarious. I mean, he would say crazy things. And it was really just coming out of the core of his personality, regardless of what was going on with him health-wise. I remember one night I was going through a program a show that I recently recorded, and I'm singing all these songs, and he's sitting there, still had a sense of humor, sitting there listening to all these songs. After like the fifth or sixth one, he was like, "Oh, Maisie, that's enough. God, what are all these old-fashioned songs? Oh my God." I was like, thanks. Really, thank you. He was even funny in the hospital when he was really sick. Hilarious. Oh, he was awesome. He's a really great dad. All my memories of Liberia is around food. I love to eat. What can I say? Coconut trees, palm trees, the market women on the side of the street selling juicy fruit gum, frozen Kool-Aid in a bag, tuck crackers, Sophie's ice cream, listening to my dad blast music on the weekends when they weren't working, and being on our swing set outside, hanging out with my cousins. I mean, those were really my friends, and my sister. Gosh, red dirt. When we would drive up to Broadville to visit my mom's parents, all the red dirt, which was so beautiful, and I really missed it when I moved here. It was so weird, a funny thing to miss. Um, the beach, Cooper's Beach, um, sugarcane, fried plantains, cakes from Auntie Myrna Tolbert, my dad's first cousin, Auntie Tripetas, uh, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother's cakes, Big Mommy's cakes. Guess I like to eat, huh? All my memories are like of food. And to Liberia, I think really I've only gone back 3 times. It's my memory. The first time I went, I was a teenager. I went to visit with my grandparents, and that was nice. I was still kind of awkward, but it was nice. And then the second time I went, I was invited by Ellen Johnson Sirleaf to sing for her inauguration, and that was, I would say, one of the greatest experiences I've ever had, ever. I flew in. I was really nervous. I went to the Capitol building, I think that's where I was, to warm up, get ready. Found out that morning that the guy who was supposed to play for me, his car broke down, couldn't get into town. Luckily, there was a choir singing as well. And so he jumped in. I was singing the national anthem, which is a huge deal. So I get on the stage. There are all these heads of states or, diplomats who are representing their countries, all these cameras. And I'm like, this is fabulous. And I sang. It was so cool to sing for the first woman president there and sing in front of all of those dignitaries. I would say that one of the most sort of hair-raising moments was I was asked to sing a second song, and it wasn't planned. And I had no idea what in the world I was going to do. So I had to pull something from out of the sky that I had prepared for a recent gig, a Nigerian song, which might have caused some waves, but that's what I did. But it was very cool to be back. I had a great time, and it was a short trip, but very impactful. The last time I went back was for my Auntie Nettie funeral. It was a state funeral since she was, a former first lady, and who had asked me to go and sing for that. And Antoinette Padmore Tubman, my grandfather's sister. I remember I have a memory of her when we were kids, and I don't know why. I guess we'd go to their house to visit. Their house was cool. I remember it had like black marble, or maybe I'm just dreaming. And I always thought she was very pretty. She had I like her skin. She had pretty skin, pretty hair. But I don't have strong memories of her. Of course, I have much stronger memories of Auntie Cuckoo and Uncle Gabriel's house. And they had a lot of kids. And I'm like, oh, I want to have a lot of kids like that in my house. Those are my memories of them. My being Liberian, and I think because of my age, when we moved here permanently, had a real impact on me. I was always proud of the family that I came from, and proud that I was a Liberian. And I think, adjusting to living here in the United States and having my parents have to adjust their entire lives, as so many others had to do, I would say, was a pretty major. And it took a lot of time to settle in, I think, more than I think a lot of people might realize, psychologically, emotionally, and all of that. But it was always something that I held to, because I felt that it was a strong foundation, and it's sort of like something I could lean on or lean into as I developed as a teenager. It made me feel like many times I would feel like I didn't belong anywhere. I certainly didn't feel like I belonged in any particular group of kids, because I didn't quite fit in. And it was always something, my Liberian heritage, or being from Liberia, and my memory of it, accurate or inaccurate, that was something that I knew was solid and that I could lean on. And I continue to do that, I think. I am a singer, a classical singer, classically trained, mostly a recitalist, which means it's me and a piano singing, operatic sounding stuff. We're usually really small audience. Um, so I do that. And my quote unquote day job, I am an event producer. I've worked for some firms, small firms in New York, and currently, I got a new job this year during COVID, of all things. I am the vice president of awards for the James Beard Foundation, which is a nonprofit that celebrates culinary arts and food media, I would say. In this country, it's a national awards program, and I'm overseeing their awards program. I mean, I think one thing that I definitely got from my parents, I think my dad in particular, was my African heritage, the fact that I am an African person, and that connection to the Americas, to North America, specifically to Black America, especially being Liberian. It's not just the Caribbean, but it's also, the connection to African Americans. When I graduated, when I got my master's in music and I moved to New York, I had to put together a concert, and I was looking for some repertoire that was more reflective of my heritage. So I didn't come across any Liberian composers, but I did come across Nigerians that I had never heard of. And that was really interesting when I started to sing music by West Africans, written or arranged by West African composers. I felt like I found a missing thread that kind of connected me back, at least to the West Coast of Africa. And that was very meaningful to me as a musician, as a performer, as an artist. And I would say I probably got that from growing up in Liberia, and certainly from listening to all the school music that my dad would play in the house. The other thing that I always enjoyed besides classical music, because I started playing piano when I was like 4 or 5, I think, all classical in terms of technique. But because my dad played jazz, he played R&B, he played all kinds of music in the house, I was always influenced by that. So I grew up listening to, when I say growing up, in college, I really started listening to a lot of jazz singers. So I've always enjoyed jazz vocalists quite a bit. And most recently, I started to move into kind of like what they call cabaret music. And so I had my first cabaret show this year. It was virtual. And I performed, I think, like 10 or 11 songs in celebration of this Black British singer named Mabel Mercer. That's the concert I was singing for Daddy, and he was like, "What's with all these old songs?" So that's what I'm doing a lot of now. It's fun and it's cool. I want to talk a little bit about anybody who wants to go into the performing arts, music in particular. I would say the best thing you can do for yourself is to learn who you are through the music that you sing. And it doesn't have to be specifically music from your heritage, but it probably should include some of that. That's your core, and you should never let go of it. It makes you sing other music better, actually. At least that's been my experience. And then for my so-called day job, if you're interested in something like the culinary arts, you should pursue it. It's a difficult career. I always feel like it seems like it's pretty similar to performing arts. It is definitely a form of artistry. And if you are from Africa or from the Caribbean in particular, use your talent to show your heritage. Don't lose sight of that. You don't need to westernize anything. You need to be authentic, learn where your ingredients come from, learn where the dish comes from if you can, learn the history of it, and use it as a platform to support our heritage and the diaspora, because believe me, there's a place for everybody. And who knows, you might eventually win an award. I don't know. Very prestigious. some people have called it the Oscars, of the food world. Really, it's they're accolades for your talents, and that talents can and should represent um, excellence. And in addition to that, we've been working on an audit of the awards and just announced it recently. So besides talent, it's, what are you doing in your community to create better community? To, what are your efforts in pushing equity for race, gender, people who are maybe at a disadvantage? What are you doing to make a more sustainable and a healthy work culture? How are you supporting the industry in that regard? I like fried okra and rice. I love palm butter, but I think really, yeah, flour sauce and rice. Palava sauce, for y'all who don't know what that means. I personally win an award, but as the producer of an annual festival called Harlem Eat Up, we won an award at a convention for festivals, like national North America. And so we won a Best of the Fest award. So that was pretty cool because I was the lead producer for that. I think that my grandparents would want to be remembered as leaders in the history of Liberia, leaders in their careers, for sure. Keepers of history. My grandfather, for example, was a published author. I believe his book has been used in college courses. My father, I think, was an intellectual. I know he was an intellectual. He created our family tree for the Barclays, Grimes, the Wiles, the Padmores. I would say he would want to be remembered as a family man and a loving dad, a loving relative, a loving husband, and a cool guy. He definitely would be remembered as a cool guy, without a doubt. My mom probably as a woman who is strong, a career woman for sure, and who was also able to balance her career and being a mother and wife.